Hi, welcome to the garden. And today I have a very special guest, Ursula from the Ascension Playground. And there's nothing like more than playgrounds and people are playing with the stuff we play with. And Ursula and I met a year ago when I built a grid for her. And we talked about she works. If she will move her head a little bit, she can show you some of her. She does artwork like that. So you can tell, looking at my grids and knowing what I do, why this woman and I get along. And she has been practicing and doing things in the last year. And just give us a quick summary of what the Ascension Playground's been, and then we'll go into the sacred geometry part.
Great. Well, Nancy, you've been an inspiration to me personally. And so I've been listening in the background for years, especially during the last two, to all things metaphysical. And I was so inspired when I received my personal crystal grid from you. And then I was even more surprised when it started working. I mean, I did exactly what you told me, firing it up, putting my intention and prayer. But the surprise was how quickly the grid just helped me remove some of the blocks I had in the way that I didn't even know I had in the way. So we were playing, and then the playground was on my heart to just take some of these heavy duty esoteric wisdom, like hermetic wisdom, and try and bring it to a place of, as a child, this big secret is we can't enter heaven with our big heavy minds and our stuffy adult shirts, so it's the childlike nature of bridging into the multidimensional realms, almost like a rainbow,
right?
Being able to move through different frequencies, and so it's a lot about play. And then my dear friends Robbie and Jimmy, you may know him as Akashic Bob and Jimmy, we've been chit-chatting every weekend for the last 6 months, and we decided to help activate a playground and work as a team, very Aquarian, to just inspire others. This is the sole purpose, is just to share some of the things we're learning in the new energy on Earth. Here's some tools that Robert's picked up, or Jimmy as an incredible healer. This is what he's learning. I'm a painter. And then did I say Bob's an incredible Akashic record reader? Put the three of us together, put us on a playground, and then we invite special guests like you, Nancy, and others, just to share like what's going on, because there's so much, we're living in a time where the turbulence is there, but how do we stay centered and focused? And so your invitation to come and talk about sacred geometry was perfect timing.
Well, you just said one of those words that freaks me out in the esoteric world. It's the hermetic codes. Could they have found a worse word? I mean, it really sounds like something you wouldn't want to eat, wear, ever be near.
It has to do with Hermes, the Hermes and the Germes. So
I know, but it's
a lot of communication and healing and health.
But if they'd have called it Hermes code, it would have been better than hermetic code. Anyway.
Well, try saying Thoth or Thoth.
Yes.
Thoth wisdom. It's like, do you have a slur?
Yeah. So
hermetic wisdom.
Okay. What Ursula and I were going to talk about was sacred geometry, and because it's one of those things that I think gets a really bad rap. Because first of all, because none of us like geometry unless you're a real freak in high school. I really disliked it. I flunked it one semester. So, and so when I heard that I was reading about stones and placing crystals, and that there was these forms, then it kind of got my interest. And so in the notes below, there's the illusion of reality. It's a 30-minute, I think, thing on YouTube. The guy did it 4 years ago. It really takes you through the steps in the sacred geometry and the reason, and it's a fun, playful, interesting look at the forms in nature. And one of the things I've known all my life is everything's a pattern. And we all have patterns, and the closer and closer we get, the more we all have the same sort of patterns, which ought to have convinced us a long time ago that we're all part of this one universe. Apparently, some people have not yet gotten the message. But and the reason understanding sacred geometry right now is really the concepts of it and how energy flows through it is because that's how we connect to the universe that we're all part of, and how it connects back to us, and how it puts us in the chain. And if you can understand, that's why my grids work, is because they're tied to those. I mean, when I know what I'm working on, I know what energy to bring in, and that's how I do it. It's a little difficult to explain to people how to do it. But one of the things that you'd wanted me to say, Ursula, was, I was about to say Ursi, and I'm not going to do that to you.
You don't have to.
Was you said if I could get some pictures of my grids in the garden, because the garden is also a grid. It's a very specific grid. It's actually the if you take the planes that are in fluorite crystal and flatten them out, that's what's the garden's made of, which is kind of fun.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, in fact, what I loved about the grids that you create, Nancy, is that you introduced me to this sacred geometry activation guidebook.
Mm-hmm.
So when you invited me to come on your show, I'm like, okay, I better do a little homework and see
Mm-hmm.
a little bit more about this grid. And if you don't mind, would you like me to pull
Yeah.
a card to see
Yeah, pull a card. We can talk about
geometry wants to join us?
Mm-hmm.
How does that sound? Here, let me move over here then. So this is the Sacred Geometry Activations Oracle Guidebook Lawn. And Nancy, this is what you introduced to me, because I said, okay, I want to learn more about the card that you pulled for me to create my grid. And so we're going to pull a card. And Nancy, when you tell me to stop shuffling, I'll stop. So who wants to come play with Nancy and I? What geometry wants to come join us today?
Stop.
Okay,
Stop.
I'm going to stop. Do you want me to cut the deck?
Yep. Just cut it once and flip it over.
Cut it once. And do you want this card or this card?
The one your hand's on right now. Yeah.
Okay,
that's
this
it.
is the geometry that's coming to play with us. And wouldn't you know, it's number 9 and it's beautiful. Allowance.
I've built that into a grid. It really makes a beautiful grid.
Wow. Well, here's its message for us. This card invites us to be open to whatever comes our way, without judgment, without opinion, without fear, and without resistance. Wow. So this is joining our energy with you and I. Let me stop sharing. So thank you, Allowance.
Yeah, it also says it's to help us with the to dance with the dance of existence and expansion. So this really totally speaks to what I was talking about, beginning to understand sacred geometry.
Awesome.
And so
when people have a private session with you, you pull a card from Lon's deck, and that informs the grids that
that's right. Create.
And you've got so many beautiful grids. I could just look at your grids all day, because there's such a beautiful pattern and frequency that you pick up on.
Well, this is the garden, and this funny ovally kind of shape, if you look at it, that's called a Vesica Pisces. And that's a very important thing, because it's the first form where we find triangles, and you find 2 triangles in it. And this is really a form of great balance. And on the garden, I can build any of the grids you're going to see, but as it ends up, this is one of the earlier grids that I built.
Wow.
And normally grids are kind of like this; they're sort of circular. And then this one is in an 8x10, because it just won't fit any other way. And that's bumblebee jasper. And I'll mix stones. This particular grid has, it was, I'm going to go back one. It's moving too fast. I'm not hitting anything. It's just moving. Okay. This is amethyst done in a pyramid, which you can't really tell from this perspective. But I use a lot of pyramids in the middle, because pyramids spread the energy out evenly. And so when you're thinking about looking at gridding something, you can look at this. This is a green calcite, which I like to use a lot. And these little pink things are rhodochrosites. And there's some ice calcite, which I love. I just love ice calcite. And this is fusite. It has rubies. It can have ruby colors in it. This is a beautiful tiger's eye. Now, if you notice, this one's 3 is the prominent number on it, and we did it again.
Oh, that's my favorite.
I know, but we got to go back to the 3s. I can't explain 3s looking at Gretchen's.
They all want to be seen.
Yeah, this is malachite, these big orange, these big green chunks. But there were a lot of 3s in this. And 3s, if you know your numerology at all, it means communication and dealing with groups. And so this is bringing in new energy to change a person to communicate differently. And that's what this is really about. And that's green moss agate and orange yellow calcite. I like calcite a lot.
And then the geometry underneath, was that informed by the cards you selected?
That was informed by before I started using the garden, because I didn't have a given form, and it came from a packet of royalty-free. Oh, we did it again.
Wow!
Yeah, I know.
You have, your garden is
okay.
Full of, oh.
This is the one you like so much, and it also has a pyramid in the middle. And I built this for a friend of mine to bring prosperity to the opening of her new store, which she opened approximately 6 months before COVID started. And it was the first grid I ever affixed, because she was going to have it in the store. And she said, I don't want my pretty stones to wander. So, and this has a cool stone in the corner, the black stone that's not really part of the circle. That's what's called a Chinese writing stone. And it's a slate kind of stone, and it has white lines in it that look like Chinese writing.
Wow. Wow.
And
so that stone, is it kind of grounding, or is it just overseeing the grid? How does that?
It was just a signature to her.
Oh, it's
from me, because she's a good friend of mine. And this is the next grid. And this is also a good friend of mine. This is my friend that's in Colorado. And when I first, that's got pyrite in the center. Oh, and we're just going to do this the whole time, aren't we? Okay. It has pyrite in the middle, and then it has the calcites around, and then it has dark green aventurine. Then it has red carnelian, which is for love and health. And then it has pink quartz for settling and calming. And then it has, I'm blanking on the name of the stone, but it's a gorgeous blue stone. And it has little pink opals. That's an opal. That's an Indian opal. It's not an Australian opal. It's not the kind that has the light in it. But this whole thing is, she was at a point in her life where she was really trying to change everything. And since she's gotten this, she's done a whole lot to really change a lot of stuff. She's the friend I went to visit in Colorado. That's the first time I ever saw a grid. And when I built this grid for her, I thought, God, that is the most crowded grid I've ever built. And I wasn't sure I really liked it, but when I look back on it now, I really kind of like it.
And that pattern, and this pattern too, is the flower of life.
Yes, this is a flower of life. And no, it's just going to jump all, I'm sorry, I'm just not used to these.
They all want to be seen.
They all want to be seen. This is the flower of life. And this is what happens. You start with one circle, get 2 circles. We're going to show that if you still have that on your computer.
I do.
We can look at it. And the mixtures of stones, you'll see there's 3 pieces of pyrite in this. And pyrite is a grounding stone. It's also a prosperity stone. There's the amethyst again, and that's I believe is Brazilian amethyst. And this is Amazonite, which if you want, this is actually my daughter's grid. And this grid was put together so that she'd been interviewing, and she wanted a specific job, but she would get so upset. And the Amazonite is around her to stop. If you have panic attacks or anxiety, get a piece of Amazonite and carry it with you. That's a really good stone. And within 2 weeks of us lighting this grid up for her, she got the job she still has, which she likes.
Gorgeous. And there's Metatron's cube.
That's Metatron's cube. And we're going to go back to Metatron's cube. Everyone's going to say, God, this woman's schizophrenic. This is Metatron's cube. And this is a quartz cluster that I put in the center of it because the meaning of it, and this has some gorgeous carnelian around it. It also has some polished tourmaline around it. And these are grounding stones, and the carnelian is for the heart. And if you notice that I have these sort of quartz points. Those come from Brazil too. Not quartz, amethyst points.
Amethyst
And
points. I love those amethyst.
and when you put them around that way, they take the energy that's contained in this and then they swirl it around and make it stronger.
Wow.
You can do that with quartz points also. Let's see how bad we jump this time. This is that's divine.
Whoa.
This grid is divine feminine, not the one we're looking at right now. But where we're going is divine feminine, and it actually is a grid I made for another reader. And it had these feathers that were on it. In the illustration, there were feathers like things coming off, and those work great for feathers. And it's got rose quartz and a lot of red jasper for protection. And I think that's crocodile jasper, tiny little bits of crocodile jasper, which is a beautiful stone.
It's just
and in the middle was this most incredible chunk of rose quartz I'd ever seen. And because it was mixed with something else, so it wasn't purely rose quartz, and it's just gorgeous. This was in my house where I used to live on Hunter's Glen, and I put it together to try and help me heal. Okay, we're just going to go with it now, guys, because I'm giving up on trying to control this. That's green calcite.
Yeah.
There's another pyramid.
With Metatron's cube.
Metatron's cube.
Yeah.
There's another one where stones are mixed, and this has an entry stone.
Oh,
and it also has a pyramid on top of it, and it's a Metatron's cube.
Mm.
And this one is change, and I'm going to hold on to it. I thought I was going to hold on to it.
I
Okay.
love that geometry. It felt very Asian. That last
It
one.
does. This one, it's change, and you can tell it's change because it's got five.
Five-pointed star.
5 points. 5 is change. And this one has a lot of rhodochrosite, a lot of grounding stones. And as I remember, that's what was going on in her life. And so we wanted to reflect that. Then there's this one which has orange calcite again, and a lot of Amazonite. And,
Since you began the grids, how many do you think you've made for people? How many?
100, over 100. This one, I'm going to show you. This one's weird because this one was, if it'll go back, this one was made for a woman who's an insurance agent, and she wanted to, and this is before I was using the cards that you just showed. This was just what I was making up in my head. And she needed the 4 amethysts to ground her. This is obsidian. And she wanted obsidian on this because she's from Mexico, and she's from where we get some of and this stuff is razor sharp. And when I did this for her, she helped me build it in her office, and it's freestanding. It's still in her office. It's in a file drawer that no one's allowed to open, and they'll work there too. And she has the 3 stones for communication, and she had the 3 pieces of obsidian to help cut through the problems she might have.
Oh my goodness.
And then this is another one that's just big chunky stones. These are mostly just tumbled fluorites. It's another one that looks, I love this one.
Oh my goodness, yeah.
Because, oops, let's see if it can stay. It can stay, okay. I love this one, and that's got that wonderful carnelian around the pyramid. And as I remember, this woman needed, this was a woman or man, but they needed a lot of protection of their heart. Then they had the tempering of the amethyst and the protection from there. And then they had the reaching out into the world with the calcite, the color. And by this, I use a lot of chakra colors in these things. So this is like third eye or crown chakra wisdom, but this was sacral chakra power.
Well, I have a question for you before you
move
on. So, when we talk about geometry, in the earlier chit chat we had before recording, you mentioned this beautiful story about the center point.
Right.
And the center point for many of these grids has been a pyramid. Can you talk a little bit about how life begins with that single center point?
Yes, we begin. Let's see what the next one is. Okay, this is my own, was my own personal grid. And this one has another one that's, but it shows it better what you're talking about. Okay, you can't see this, but this is a selenite tower, and it's at the very center, and it pulls the energy down and it rotates it back up, and it sort of flows like that. That's how the energy flows in a grid. And this, I needed adventuring to bring in luck, and so I happen to have a rune set that's adventuring, so I put it on my grid. I'm just telling you, you can be as creative as you want. These are big chunky chunks of pyrite. And then there's the yellow calcite around the edge. And then you see the kyanite, these little chips sort of connecting everything. And then I had, it's actually the same, chemically, it's the same thing as the sapphire over here. Wow. But it's not, I mean, it's not a sapphire. I mean, you couldn't turn it into a gemstone. But there's one's a sapphire and one's an emerald, and they bring in the energy of those sorts of stones. And then this is, it's like a piece, it's like a chunk of lava that bubbled up like it was boiling at the top, and it just froze in one place. But they're gorgeous stones. They're really interesting. And this is what I put together. And you see, at the top I wrote, "We are prosperous, healthy, happy, and live in abundance." And underneath, beyond that, is a whole list of people that I wanted to help. And this is my rutilated quartz wand that I keep with it. And I still have this grid. I've changed this out. It's now a multi-tiered chakra stone where the base is red and it goes all the way up to purple, and it's a pyramid. So you can play with them if you have them and they're not attached. If you do them in your own home, you can do them and not have them be affixed. I can't mail them to you unaffixed. They will not arrive looking like they're supposed to. Wow. So, but it starts with the center, and it starts with one dot, and then it creates a second dot, and that creates a second circle. And then those two circles flip and they become 4 circles. And that's how the flower of life grows. And we'll look at that when we get to your illustration, the flower of life, or the seed of life, if you still have it. This is Metatron's cube again. And you can see their wand is there. And this one's, this was for a friend of mine. And now we're just going crazy. But you can see there's carnelians in here. And this is my favorite. I think this is one of my favorite grids ever. And we have to go back to it.
Oh, the Taurus.
Yes. This is called transparency. That if you look that card up, that's what it's about. Mm-hmm. And I was so terrified because I was like, where am I going to find enough stuff? And I went in and they had this tumbled clear, slightly clear quartz. And you're going back to it again. Gotta do this.
Well, can you sing your little song that you say?
Oh, when I go to the rock shop. Yes.
Yeah, to the rock shop. Because you never know who's waiting for you there.
Huh? I never know what's waiting. It's always what I need. And this had this gorgeous ice calcite, and we're going to get out of this because it's making me crazy trying to hold it. But as you can see, there's a lot of different ways you can work with it. If you understand the basic idea of a point is where we begin. And actually, okay, when, here she goes. Okay. Say I'm going to put the thing below and about understanding sacred geometry, because he does he has beautiful illustrations of what I'm going to explain very badly right now, I think. But you start off in a completely blank universe. It's completely dark. And then there's a spark of consciousness. And that spark of consciousness is one point. And then that spark of consciousness gets lonely. So it finds another point, right? And then they circle each other trying to communicate, and they create a circle. And then that's so much fun, they create another circle. And then those two spin and they create another circle. And it just builds out and out and out. And it builds out until you get to the seed of life, which every faith, from what my understanding is, and from my reading on this, every faith, every denomination, every group of believers, every tribal belief, whatever it is, they all have the seed of life somewhere in their iconography.
So it's
just like they
circles
have the
around
three,
one.
they have the three swirls that, like you see in galaxies. And what's important about this is I didn't understand. I mean, I've been messing with it for a while. I've had a time to look at it, but if you watch The Changing of the Gods, that documentary about just Pluto and Uranus and how their interactions caught and how that's a sign from the universe, a raised consciousness. Yeah. That's the seed of life. And you can see it's all made up of circles on circles on circles on circles. And it all starts from the one point. But what we've learned is that we are not terminally unique as humans. We are part of the same dance. Our cells have things inside them that look like this. And then you expand it out. And when we went out and looked in the galaxy, there's places that look like this. So there's a greater consciousness working in, around, and through each and every one of us. And that's the geometry that I work with in a way. And you've witnessed it, Ursula, it works.
Oh, yeah. In fact, this of life first, and then it turns into a flower. There's also a tree and a fruit of life.
Mm-hmm.
But this image, it really, if you enjoy drawing and you ever chose to challenge yourself with how to draw the flower of life, when you're drawing it, you really do feel how every petal is connected to the other. And so, Nancy, as you were saying, we are all part of this greater cosmos. And one term people like to hear is, have you seen the movie Matrix?
Mm-hmm.
That movie kind of gave you a flavor of how there are these connecting points. And, we're part of this greater, as small as the microcosm, as large as the macrocosm.
Mm-hmm.
Your grids that are carrying these frequencies are in some ways reminding us subconsciously that it's not just my mind and my heart. There's something even deeper that connects us through our hara, the belly
Mm-hmm.
and soul. And that's what Lon talks about in her guidebook, the activation guidebook.
Mm-hmm.
And she says the geometry, it's sacred because this pattern and these certain particular patterns show up repeatedly within us and in nature and in the stars. But here's what it is. It's how the universe can speak to us that will, if we tune into the geometries, or if we allow your beautiful crystal grids to be in our home or at our work, there's this open line of communication that's happening that we may not sense with our minds. We may feel a little bit with our hearts, but we've just opened up a channel.
That's, yeah. And I didn't know when I started this, that's what I was doing. I had no idea. All I knew was I built my first grid, the one that I showed you that had the selenite pyramid, and I've since changed it. But I put it for peace and prosperity and abundance to all of us and just fun stuff. So the next day I open up my emails and I have an email from Dorothy Morgan, who I did not know. And she said, she goes through her newbie email people who've contacted her. I knew who she was. I mean, I'd emailed her about something. She's talked about something. And I said, I really agree with you about that. And actually what the comment was, Dorothy makes astrology very, very personal. And, instead of, all of the other kinds of, and this was before COVID Trump was in office, but, before there was a lot of panic-stricken people. And I just said, you really teach it, you really present it in a way I appreciate, because so many people make it into like giant universal issues and things. And so she just blind picks out of newbie correspondence. And she sent me a thing saying, I'm willing to do a free reading for you. So I contacted her and said, I've taken a course in astrology, so I've even drawn my own chart. So she said, oh, good, I'll do a progress chart for you, which for those of you who don't know it, and I know we're losing all the same people who don't like geometry because we're doing astrology. But a progress chart is you move your birthday one day for every year you've been alive. So like now my in a progressed chart, my sun is in Cancer from where it started. That's what anyway. I don't know how to do it. I don't understand what it does. I mean, I'll listen and I'll listen to their interpretations, but it's nothing I was ever trained to do. So I was just delighted to get it. And, you know, that's not cheap to get that kind of work done. And I thought, well, that's something that just sort of popped up, and it popped up within a day of when I put this grid together. And then my friend that you saw, you really liked the grid that had all the stones all clumped together. And I kept saying, you know, well, she was on the list underneath my initial grid, and she called me the next day, and she'd been looking for work for a couple months, and she was kind of getting like, am I never going to get hired again? And she's in a field that, you know, she's a trained professional, so she needs to kind of go to being a trained professional. And she called me up and she said, I'm still in that. You told me about that grid thing. And because I always get people's approval. By the way, don't put people on your grid unless you get their approval, because they need to know what's whizzing at them. Anyway, she said, did you put me on that grid thing? And I said, yeah. And she said, I got 2 job offers today, one to start tomorrow and one to start in a week. And she said, I was thinking I was never going to get hired again. And she said, when did you put me on it? And then she talked to the people, and they'd made their decision the day after the grid had gone up. Dorothy Morgan, I asked her, when did you pull the names? Because trust me, one thing you learn about astrologers is they write down everything they do and what time they did it, because that's important. And well, that's how they can see how valid what they're doing is.
For accuracy, yeah.
That's why I would never be an astrologer. I'm not that organized. And she looked it up, and she had pulled my name 45 minutes after I powered it up.
See, that's so, Nancy, 2 thoughts for you, just as we're riffing. One, from my heart to yours, I have this picture, and I don't know how to do it, but I almost imagine if you were willing, we get like 10 people and you in the middle, and everyone brings their grid. And they're given, okay, 2 or 3 minutes to share with you, the co-creator.
Mm-hmm.
This is how your grid has impacted my life. I mean, it's an energy. And so oftentimes as the artist, you don't know how people are living with it, but I just imagine you in the center, and then all these little faces, and then we hit one of the buttons and say, how would you like to share? You know, and so that's one thought. The second thought, I'm going to surprise you a little bit. I'm going to show you what you inspired me to do, because I am a painter, but this is nothing like yours. However,
that's gorgeous.
However, the Taurus with the center of very light, but this is just a little 8 by 8. But already as I'm painting it and working with the geometry, you inspired me to go deeper. This in my room, I know that the rose quartz energy is radiating wherever this is placed.
Right.
And whatever crystal I put in the center, I glued this one down. But that's my second thought, is not only what your grid has done for people's lives personally, what's shown up, but also this ripple out effect. Like, oh my gosh, as a painter, Ursula is inspired now to start playing with the crystals in her paintings, which I've never done before. So I just want to say thank you, because we're all looking for inspiration to help oneself and one's family, one's community, and others.
Right. I think when you're in this community, whether you're throwing cards or, you know, I used to work at psychic fairs, and I've seen people read everything. I mean, everything. There was a guy who he sat next to me 3 times. He's a delightful man. He had a Bible, and he knew all the page numbers, and he'd have you pick a number between something to something, and then you picked 1, 2, 3, 4. He'd go to that page, and then the 1 was the upper left and upper right, and then 3 was lower left and 4 was lower right. And he'd read that segment of the Bible, and he'd talk to you about what was going on in your life. He did 3 readings for me, and he was incredibly accurate, you know, with the Bible. I mean, you know, I'm sure the Bible thumpers who were outside the psychic fair would have had a seizure, but
as an oracle.
The
Bible is an oracle deck. Let me see. Here's the word.
Yeah, and we had people there throwing chicken bones, literally throwing chicken bones. You know, I mean, but they could see a pattern, and that's part of the sacred geometry. Ultimately, it draws you back in to creating a pattern. The thing that you painted, the vortice, at the end of that show I've got posted down below, I'll have the information down below. That guy shows the vortice, and according to some people who do ley lines and earth energy work, they believe that ley lines come together and form vortices. That's what they think Sedona is, Mount Shasta.
Yes.
Ooh,
There are these nodal points from
Right.
that energy field.
Right.
So the torus has, like, our head has a torus, but the heart's torus is so much bigger. And then it connects to the earth's torus. So earth is a living being, Gaia. She has her own. So we are so connected into these matrices.
Yeah, and once you get into understanding that kind of energy, then the fact that people choose, and you have to decide that you're going to choose to attach to it, and because your other option is to stay in the 3D world where there is no connection, and ultimately would be even less than there is now.
Can you see that picture? Sorry.
Yeah, infinity.
So guess what? I took a little online class from Jane 108.
Mm-hmm.
He found this infinity symbol within that toroidal shape.
Yes.
So when the energy starts moving, because it goes out and then it comes back in.
Yeah.
So much like whatever's within us goes out and then
Mm-hmm.
it comes back in. It's the infinity shape. We're all like pumping energy and then looping it back.
Well,
And so
Rory Duff says that these vortices are the grail that the Templars were looking for. That's what the Holy Grail was, is that finding that energy. And he's got he actually has probably not one of the most interesting as far as just cinematically presented, but really interesting if you want to think. Rory Duff did a show, and it's on YouTube, and you can see it, and it's about looking for the Grail. Finding it and finding the spots on earth that have that kind of energy. But if you think about it, when a vortice, if you got it, what the vortice looks like, guys, is a giant swirly donut. It's really what it looks like. But that's kind of very cup shaped, and things go in the cup and come out, and that kind of energy, we need to learn how to work with it, because we are in a point, if you all don't know much about this, but in 2017, 2018, our part of our solar system got dragged out, and we were, for a couple, like 12,000 years, we were surrounded by this cloud that I don't know whether to explain it, but it was a cloud that sort of protected us from subatomic particles like neutrinos and protons and all that stuff. And because I also did not I never finished physics either. And now we've shifted out in a place where we are getting bombarded with levels of cosmic energy that have not fallen on the human race in 12,000, 13,000 years. And on top of that, they know that, and they're not sure where it comes from, but big sweeps of cosmic energy like waves come and they hit us. And one hit us right before COVID started. Yeah. So the energetic changes are starting, and they're also hitting the sun. And that's why the sun's going nuts and throwing out all kinds of radiation. And, just hope that our poles hold on, guys, because otherwise we're going to be fried meat. There are a lot of little fried folks on the earth. But it's not going to fry us the way we're getting it now, but we're getting light. And in physics, there's no way to escape these particles of light. I mean, as any person who's ever gone on the beach knows, and especially if you're white like me, man, I burn. But you get this light on you, and it's, they use radiation to cure cancer. They use radiation to change cells. So every single cell in every one of us is changing. And when I was looking this up for another show I did on energetics, you guys must think this woman must have the most boring life. She goes looking for this stuff. But I ran across an article by some cancer scientists. And of course, they go down to the most cellular level when they're treating patients to see what the efficacy of what they're doing to treat them. They began to see changes they weren't putting there. and they can track it back to when we moved away from this cloud. So it's not just their patients, it's all of us. And it's going, some people think it's going to awaken what they call junk DNA, the DNA in our DNA that they don't know what it does. I have no idea. Don't write me and say, oh, tell me more about that, because you just heard everything I know about it. I just know what I have now is I have that seed planted in my mind. So if I run across a documentary or an article or something, I can read it and follow it. But we're all changing.
If your listeners want to know more, Pam Gregory, I think she's an astrologer that you
Yes.
listen to as well. She's got some great YouTube conversations around being in this photonic light belt and what's happening to us physically and the evolution of our consciousness, because some of this light that we're moving into, the light has codes. And so we're going to go back to sacred geometry then, as when you break our human body down into its basics, we really are vibrating energy in a particular geometry. So it's looking at, okay, as we move into this new age of light and new area within the galaxy, just know that sacred geometry is available to inform you. And I think this is perhaps why some of your grids are being supercharged, because we are in a different kind of new earth energy.
Yeah, I started building the grids when we were shifting out, not knowing, because trust me, I didn't know about that shift until a year ago, and I've been following it. There's a really good book by a woman named Penny Pierce, and she's British, and it's called Frequencies, and it's how our wave frequencies, our energetics in our body are changing. And I'm working with some people. We're working on teaching people how to use pendulums to track their own frequencies, because then you can know, am I doing what I'm supposed to be doing? Am I in the mode? Is it going okay? And so look for Ursula. Undoubtedly, I'll go play in the Ascension Playground. So we'll go play with frequencies.
Get ready. So I would just say in closing that, Nancy, I'm just planting that idea in your mind and heart that if there's ever a chance that we could surround you with our gratitude, with real life, because I'm just going to just say, I shared this with you before, but when I got your grid for change, 2 weeks later, my father passed away. And somehow activating that grid helped me balance through this pivotal shift. I mean, I thought I was ready, but it happened so suddenly. He had COVID. He was not in the United States. There was a lot of like, how are you going to identify all this stuff? Oh, the crematoriums were full. Oh my God. So it was ridiculously bumpy for me, but your grid that is with me still, I just come to it with love and support. And I go, thank you, Nancy Jean, the crystals and the sacred geometry underneath the crystals that helped me through perhaps a very, very dark time in my life. So if I could share that forward, that's what I would say, is really give this a second look. And there's a lot of passion around the stones and what they have to share with us.
Yeah, and they can help you balance. I work with them all the time, and people are like, how do you know which ones to pick? And I have the same grid, the same frequency. And one time I did it with picture jasper, and another time I did it with a dyed jasper. That's a very picture jasper that I did it with was very geometric. So it all fit together like a little puzzle. The next one was the stones were like this. But they fit together, and because there's a lot of yellow in it. And the picture jasper had some yellow in it, but it was subtler. It was not that kind of yellow. And but that kind of yellow is what that person's needed. And all I can tell you is I won't know about a stone at all. And I'm going, how am I going to create that sort of sparkly background image? And then I'll go in and that's the first time I ever saw speclerite, which is a form of hematite that has little silver specks in it, and it looks like manufactured. It looks like bad bathroom tile, but it looks great when it's in a natural stone. But, and I'd never seen it before. And I walked in the store, and it was just sitting there going, oh, hi, we've been waiting for you.
Yeah. Well, if there's one last comment, would be, if you have one of Nancy Jean's grids, focus on the center point and help yourself ground.
Mhm.
ground. It's not if it's going to be turbulent, when it's turbulent, just you've got a tool that can help you really ground. And I think you can even write new intentions and put them on the back of the grid. Just
Oh yeah. And once you get a grid, now there's a couple readers that got two grids because one grid got them started and then they decided they were shifting how they were working, and we talked about it. I have one person who has three grids, but she's got one for her office, one for herself, and I forget who the third one. I just did the third one for her. No, I didn't. Wasn't for her. She gave it to a friend. But what you don't have to get a new grid. I mean, not that I don't mind making the money, but or doing the work, but your grids, I have not changed my grid, and I've had mine since February of 2019. I've changed the intentions under it. And then when my daughter, who was on that grid seemed to be working for everybody but her. So we decided maybe, I don't know if other readers have this problem. I can't read my kids. I can't read when they get married. I can't read their spouses. I can read them the second the divorce paper's signed. But so there's a lot of things about people who are closest to you, it's hardest to work with. And so my daughter said, maybe I should just get my own grid, just have you make me my own grid. So we did. And like I said, she got the job 2 weeks later, and she'd been on that grid for a year and a half and it was going nowhere fast. So, and I had one woman who did write me a note because I'd sent a thing out at one point, Ursula, and said, if you would like to make a comment on the grid, I'm thinking about putting a testimonial section on my website. It's another one of those things that's happened.
yeah.
But the woman wrote me and she said, I want to be totally honest with you. Absolutely nothing has happened since I got this grid. And she said, the other thing I'm going to be totally honest with you about is I haven't even tried. So I'm going to tell you, when you hear like Ursula was ready to, grow her artwork, or you'll hear, I'm going to interview a guy named Brad this weekend about this. And he ended up finally changing his whole career after sitting there for 5 years, never moving forward. But the whole time you were doing your stuff, so was he. He was getting ready to be able to move forward. I can't build a grid for someone who doesn't have some skin in the game.
Yeah, they have to open their channel.
They have to open themselves up.
Well, if you do share this to receive people's questions or comments, how about we do a shout out for anyone who has a grid and it's been impactful? Write your name and let Nancy know. And if you want to learn a little bit more about sacred geometry, let Nancy know. But it's really remarkable. Lon's activation guidance book, she says, there's the language of the mind, there's the language of the heart, but sacred geometry is the language of the soul.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm just sharing that as a metaphor, but it's a mystery to me because I can't explain it. You just sense it and feel it. And it's not 8th grade geometry class. There's something more about this matrix that when you allow yourself to connect in love through your heart or your hara, that amazing things can happen.
That's right. And it's the way the universe talks to us. And Pythagoras, who came up with Pythagorean theorems and all that stuff, the triangle and all that, he also came up with music. And that's why some people say that sacred geometry is the music of the spheres. And you can feel it creates a rhythm that's portrayed in a way that you can see the pattern over and over again. And I think that's true. And I think that has made it easier for me to understand the period of transition and time that we're in better, and makes me less frightened of things, because there's a lot of scary stuff going on.
But hang on tight and find your center point within your body, or go find some sacred geometry and just stare into the center.
Yeah.
It can calm you.
And if you want us to do, there's more I could do about explaining it, but I just don't know how far to get into it with people, because I don't want you all turning it off and unsubscribing and things. By the way, Ursula, the Ascension Playground is a real place on YouTube. And if you would like to go and check her out and try and subscribe, you can always unsubscribe, right? That's real easy.
And there's an open invitation. If you've got some fun new thing that you like to play with, to help you get lighter and want to share it with others, they can contact me or Robert or Jimmy, and we're happy to have you come onto the playground and tell us what you enjoy to help lighten up.
And also subjects you'd like more information about, because every once in a while I'll run into something and I kind of run into a vague reference, but I can't find anything better.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Nancy, for having
Well,
me.
thank you, Ursula, for coming over and playing in my garden.
Well, see you soon, I hope.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.